All right. So I know some of you might be thinking I just live streamed Breath of the Wild, but I do want to address this point. As soon as I turned off my live stream of Breath of the Wild, I realized that we need to address net neutrality. Today, the FCC has repealed net neutrality. Net neutrality lost in a vote of 3-1. So it barely lost, but it did lose. And it's important we talk about this because there's going to be a lot of people panicking. There's going to be a lot of people wondering what's next. There's even going to be some people celebrating. In fact, when I was looking on YouTube for videos about the aftermath here of net neutrality and how it's going to impact YouTubers, how it's going to impact you, how it's going to impact a lot of people, the only thing I could find were people celebrating, actually thinking that this is a good thing, talking about a free and open internet and how gamers like me are being paid behind the scenes by YouTube and Twitter and all these people to say these things about net neutrality, when really none of that's true. We aren't being paid by Twitter or YouTube. Just because major corporations like Twitter, Google, YouTube, and stuff are vouching for net neutrality, what you're not seeing here are the internet service providers vouching for net neutrality. Because this is a direct benefit to them. This benefits internet service providers. Because what gets lost in all of this is that large parts of the United States are controlled by various ISP providers. I'm going to actually bring up the map right now, which ISPs control which state. There is a map for this. This is from a few years ago, so this isn't 100% accurate to today. But this will give you a general idea. So you see, I live in Wisconsin here. This is my state. Time Warner Cable basically owns a majority of the state. Comcast owns a majority of Minnesota. Blah, 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 blah. You can see. And the reason this map's important is because this is why net neutrality was such a big deal. That doesn't mean there aren't options for internet providers in various areas, especially high-speed internet. Like in my area, there's a bunch of options for DSL. But there's one high-speed internet provider, and that is Charter. And Charter is owned by Time Warner Cable. So Time Warner Cable controls the only high-speed internet pathway in my state. Because of this, or at least my area, there's certain big cities that have options. So in my area, Time Warner Cable gets to control my pathway to the internet. And without net neutrality, go back to the full screen here. Without net neutrality, it basically means that Time Warner Cable gets to decide how I use the internet. This is why Google, Twitter, YouTube, and all these other websites out there were trying to get people to rally together and fight against the cancellation of net neutrality. So net neutrality isn't about, it's not about anything but the consumers, right? Net neutrality took ISPs and limited their ability to limit what we do. When I see people celebrating net neutrality being defeated today, it's not... It's out of a misunderstanding of what it means. Yes, it does suck when you see a lot of billion-dollar corporations trying to gather people to fight against, the cancellation of net neutrality, but it goes so much deeper than that. Net neutrality prevents ISPs from controlling what we do on the internet. It prevents them from blocking websites, prevents them from charging more. As an example, I pay $60 internet access for my internet access. They could theoretically charge me more because I use more bandwidth than my neighbor. And you may say, hey, that's fair, you're using more bandwidth. But here's the thing, the bandwidth is there regardless of if I use it or not, right? So it sucks. They can control what websites I view. They can block certain websites. And I realize, if they're blocking YouTube or Netflix can pay them money and keep the path line open. And that's going to fall on the big corporation side. But, Verizon, as an example, they used to block Google apps on your phone to force them to use the inferior Verizon apps. That's the kind of stuff that used to happen before net neutrality. But let's talk about what happens next. Because obviously a lot of videos I'm seeing out there right now are talking about what the state of net neutrality is that makes them happy. The people who wanted this to be defeated are very, very, very happy. But let's talk about what's next. I'm reading this a little bit off an article. This goes from TechCrunch. And they say, first off, just because net neutrality was defeated doesn't mean, oh my gosh, it's the end of the internet. it says here, and I'll display it on my PC here. It says, at first, very little is going to happen. It says, as rushed as this vote was, it doesn't make the rest of the government any faster. Voting to adopt the order doesn't magically and instantly eliminate net neutrality. First, new rules have to be entered into the Federal Register, and that won't happen for a little while. Basically, nothing's going to change for a little bit. Perhaps a couple of months. In the meantime, you're going to get a whole lot of blog posts, opinion pieces, and newspaper speeches, statements, notices of intent, and anything else that will keep the topic alive. Obviously, people are just going to keep talking about it. During this time, the FCC will point out that despite having voted in new regulations, the internet has not devolved into a corporate free-for-all, because it can't yet. Of course it hasn't, because the rules haven't taken effect yet. They will point out that companies could start changing policies or making announcements ahead of that event, but for reasons we'll go into later, that's extremely unlikely. Even if said companies do have evil intent, at any rate, don't be fooled. Do, however, continue engaging with your elected officials, blah, 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 because the fight's not technically over. It can be repealed, or it could, maybe not necessarily repealed by the FCC, but the government can step in and do something about it. So it says there are constituents that have expressed that it is important to them if they think they can get away with not paying attention for a few months, or that voters have moved on to another hot-button issue, they'll gladly spend their time and money pursuing other things. Don't let that happen. Make sure they are aware that we're aware that this is a problem that isn't going away. Early next year, there's going to be tons of lawsuits, apparently. When the rules entered into the Federal Register, the floodgates open. Right off the bat, I can think of a number of different lawsuits or challenges. Oh, do I have a misspelled title? Sorry. Oh, neutrality. My bad. All right, I fixed it. Sorry about that. So it says, a new order includes considerable provisions preventing states and municipalities from creating rules or regulations that contradict the federal ones. So, the 2015 order, of course, but there's a big difference. The authority granted by the FCC to Title II made it forced to be reckoned with. It could reach and quash incompatible state laws or practices. The new rules, however, reduce the FCC's reach considerably by restoring it to Title I, under which it repeatedly failed to establish or enforce broadband rules. Without Title II, states may ask under what authority do you presume to preempt our laws. So states can start controlling your internet, essentially. So your internet, literally depending on what state you're in, could extremely vary. Arbitrary and capricious, they're going to be talking about all this, how the internet works, and how they can control all of that, and how certain brands control certain internets. There's going to be a bunch of fraudulent comments and procedural shenanigans. Congressional action. Ultimately, as many commentators and the FCC on occasion have pointed out, the questions may have to be settled by legislation. Ultimately, the FCC derives its authority by the laws written by Congress, and if those laws are amended or others appended, it could moot the arguments in the past decade or two. 2018, of course, is an election year, and a particularly important one for a number of reasons. The majority role in the Senate hangs in the balance, and the House is always up for grabs, though the Republicans have a more commanding lead there. Political actions will naturally be divided into two sections, the lead up to the election and what comes after. I hesitate to speculate what might happen after the election. Basically, what's important is that we put people in Congress that care about trying to repeal net neutrality. If we get people in Congress that want to repeal net neutrality, the first step they could do is limit the authority of the FCC in regards to it. If they set up new provisions and new laws, it can override what the FCC has already done. And if it overrides what the FCC has already done, suddenly you could look at how Congress can step in and kind of reenact net neutrality. It's highly unlikely that happens, but it shouldn't be. It's an option we can't give up on, because we can control who we vote for. We can vote in people that are going to make new regulations to prevent the FCC from enacting the removal of net neutrality, which it's enacted. It's not technically into law yet, but it's going to be into law where net neutrality no longer exists, like a couple months from now. So we want congressional people to come in and kind of backtrack that, limit the power of the FCC, and bring net neutrality back on the table. That's like the number one thing that we really want to happen right now at this point, to get net neutrality back. But obviously, we might live in a world where net neutrality doesn't come back. And in that case, we have to consider things like the fact that ISPs are going to wait. They're not going to punish you right away because they don't want. They realize there's an election period coming up, right? If they start punishing you right away, people are going to head to the voting booths and kill this off as soon as they can. They want to wait till it's heavily ingrained and not much can be done about it legally, and then ISPs are going to burn you. So it says here, if net neutrality rules may be effectively dead, but there are several reasons why broadband providers won't make any overt changes to take advantage of the fact. For one thing, everyone is watching them like hawks. Exactly. If they do anything bad now, it's going to make people be like, oh man, we got to get net neutrality back. ISPs are under extreme scrutiny right now, both from regulators like the FTC, which will be put back in charge of them, to grassroots activists watching for any unseemly network practices. For them to immediately change their practices right after the regulation change would be hypocritical in the context of the repeated arguments that they already respect the no blocking, no throttling, no paid prioritization rules, which is already a bunch of BS because I know there's paid prioritization at Charter in my area. I know they throttle internet because immediately when I call them and when the internet is throttled, magically it's faster again. And they already have attempted to block certain things. You could just get around it. But whatever. Forgetting all of that, these are the claims they make, so they're not going to do anything extreme right now. Not that major companies generally shy away from a little hypocrisy now and then, but in the case, it would be risky. Anything they could do and would be used against them in the court of law. In one of the cases listed above, instead, it's in their interest to appear totally unaffected by this. They said, that said, they may try to pull a fast one here and there. You can help by reporting any changes you do see. So that's a big thing. You want to report any changes you do see to your local congressman that your internet provider does do now that it's repealed, because it's not illegal. It's not against the law. It can be hypocritical, but that's not, they can do it now. That's the thing. They could do it and get away with it, and we need to draw attention to it if and when it happens. There's a real chance that a lawsuit, administrative challenge, or bipartisan legislation could reverse these incredibly unpopular new rules. It's just bad business to use anything so unstable as the foundation of any major practices, and ISPs are aware of that. Blah, 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 blah. So you can expect them to resume a few programs that have been considered borderline in the past. Zero rating schemes, you can bet, will flourish. In situations where companies are mixing services, Comcast Stream TV, for instance, which essentially zero rated all of its own TV traffic, will also get a green light. You'll be targeted for these practices, and details on how they work will be interesting to scrutinize. What they kind of mean by that is the content, like if Verizon's partnered with Hulu, as an example, you could stream Hulu content and it doesn't use up any of your data. But if you stream Netflix, it could use up double data, and then you're going to peel through your data. So they won't block Netflix, but they'll make it use a ton of data and essentially make it so you don't use their service anymore. You're going to use Verizon's service. That's kind of what they're talking about with the zero rating schemes, in terms of for kind of dictating people to go to a certain content because it's easier on their data caps. So you'll be targeted for these practices, and details on how they work will be interesting to scrutinize. Ordinary users will be the ones who see these things first in test markets and targeted advertising. So if you see something suspicious, bring it to the attention of your friendly neighborhood tech site. We kind of saw a little bit of this with the Pokemon Go, actually. If you guys remember, Pokemon Go, Verizon started saying, oh, hey, look, you can go out and play Pokemon Go without using any data. Now, who cares about that, right? That wasn't a big deal. That wasn't necessarily controlling the internet. It was just trying to get mind share, and people's mind, hey, come to Verizon because we won't eat your data up for Pokemon Go. That's different than trying to force people into using one of your services instead of a competitor service by, instead of throttling, just making it so it doesn't cost any data to use that service. So yeah, that's kind of the general gist. So let me recap what happens now that net neutrality has been defeated. Net neutrality, you're not going to see any changes. It's not a law yet. Nothing can happen today. 2 months or so from now, it will finally enter into law. When it enters into law, we still might not see any changes right away because ISPs are under heavy, heavy scrutiny right now. And it goes back to the FTC, who's in control of the ISPs. And if the ISPs start doing the worst of what we fear might happen, throttling us, which they legally can do, but if they start throttling our internet, start trying to control what websites we go to, start exercising any of this power that net neutrality prevented them from having, the FTC could come down hard. Could is the key thing, because they're not doing anything illegal. ISPs will deal with the lawsuit, and if they win that lawsuit, oh boy, we're in a world of trouble if that lawsuit happens with the FTC, and then the ISPs also win that. Then, I mean, we're going to live in a world where the ISPs literally control everything we do on the internet. ISP providers they hate streaming websites, they hate YouTube, they hate Netflix. They hate Hulu. They hate any sites that are high bandwidth heavy. Yes, they're going to go to those companies and say, hey, you need to pay us a bunch of money to have the same pipelines you're used to having, so users can get these 4K videos or whatever the case may be, instead of pipelining it down and making it so people can only stream 360p videos. But it's highly unlikely we're going to see big changes like that now. It's going to be little things. I'd say 6 months from now, you're going to notice a few little tiny things. Like, we talked about before where certain things, if you're in data restrictions, like if you're using a cell phone provider, where certain applications and certain websites won't use any of your data while other websites will use your data. And they're going to start restricting you in that way. Another way is they can cut down on your data plans. As an example, Verizon offers unlimited right now. What happens if Verizon gets rid of the unlimited data plan, makes it so their top data plan is only 10 gigs, but then they turn around and make it so only the sites that they are partnered with don't use that data, and then they restrict everyone down to where everything else uses data. Will they do that? I don't know, but it's possible. And I'm not just about Verizon. I'm not trying to call them out as like this big evil corporation. AT&T can do it. Sprint can do it. T-Mobile. Pretty much any service out there. Any cell phone service can do it. There's so many. US Cellular got bought. I don't know. Anyways, a whole bunch of cell phone services out there. Any of them could do that. It's not just cell phone services. You have DSL services as well that could do this. Cable internet. Fiber internet providers could do it. It could just get really, really crazy. So they could throttle us. They could try to force us to use certain websites and applications over other websites and applications, or just downright block certain websites. It's going to be something that is slow. It's not going to change overnight, and most of us, I'd say probably 99% of us, are not going to notice any differences for years. It's net neutrality, and defending net neutrality wasn't about impacting us now. 2 years, 5 years down the road, none of us might notice any different. 10 to 15 years down the road is when everything is going to change. All the things that ISPs are going to do to take advantage of not having net neutrality and trying to maximize their revenue is going to be a slow process. The nice thing is that last time ISPs tried to do this and made it more obvious, like when Verizon was blocking the Google Wallet, that was a really big one. Remember, Verizon was blocking Google Wallet. When Time Warner Cable went to Netflix and said, look, you can't have the pipelines that all these other businesses have because you're using more bandwidth, so we're going to charge you. You had other services charging you different tiers of your internet to guarantee your speeds. Like we're going to throttle you on all these other ones, but if you get our top package that costs $100, we will not throttle you down. We guarantee that speed at all times. But other times, if you get our 30 megabyte connection, we guarantee you connections up to 30 megabytes, but oftentimes you're going to be running much lower than 30. You might be running at 10 most of the time, maybe 15. And only at off hours at like 4 a.m. are you going to hit that 30 megabytes when you're not even awake and not even going to use your internet. These are the kind of things that ISPs used to do before net neutrality happened. But when they did those things, that is when net neutrality was created. So we do have to look at this as, if things get to the extreme end, some form of net neutrality would probably come back, because we have to assume that our government isn't going to let ISPs get away with it a second time. Essentially, by repealing the net neutrality laws today, they are saying we trust what the ISPs are saying. The ISPs are saying they will not abuse their power. They will not throttle people. They will not block websites. They will not do all the things they used to do. All the ISPs have done is made a bunch of verbal promises that they are not going to do what they did before that caused net neutrality to exist in the first place. But here's the thing. If they're not going to do that stuff anyways, then why does it matter if net neutrality is enacted or not? Because according to the ISPs, it shouldn't matter if net neutrality exists or not because it doesn't impact them. But yet all of them, every single major ISP provider in the United States wanted net neutrality to go away. So why would all of them want something to go away when they all keep saying that they would abide by the rules anyways, even if they didn't exist legally? Because we all know they're not going to abide by the rules. They're going to slowly poke and prod at it to see what they can get away with. And we, the end users, unfortunately, and obviously some big businesses, YouTube, Netflix, Hulu, blah, 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 some of these big businesses are going to be hit as well with additional fees from these ISP providers. But that doesn't affect us per se. That's them. Hopefully these sites don't get shut down because it becomes too expensive. Believe it or not, for as big as YouTube is, and as for much ad revenue and all the stuff that goes through, YouTube doesn't really turn a big profit for Google. YouTube is kind of borderline on if it's even worth running, just in terms of profitability. YouTube was bought by a ton of money by Google, and I don't even know if YouTube has made their revenue back yet on YouTube that they spent to buy the place, because once they started running into these issues with ad companies and all these adpocalypse things started happening, YouTube lost some major revenue, and Google, running YouTube is kind of, I mean, Google can afford it. That's not a question of that, but YouTube isn't that profitable. Just lots of bandwidth and lots of servers and to run a website like to run a website like YouTube's insane. I mean, Google as well, but YouTube as well. So yeah, we're entering some dark times here for like the next 5 to 10 years. Again, most of you guys are not going to notice a difference. Most of you are not going to see a change. But some of you will. I probably will. I had issues with Charter before net neutrality came along. Because what we have to remember, if people are wondering, why does it matter if net neutrality is around if the ISPs are going to agree to it? Because net neutrality existed because ISPs were abusing us. The government saw what was happening and they put a stop to it. And we have to hope that if it starts happening again, the government puts a stop to it again. But until then, everything's at risk. My ISP has all the power and can do anything they want. Your ISP has all the power and can do anything they want. They can control how we use the internet. I know there's a theory out there. The greatest theory, the greatest thing to combat net neutrality was all about how a free and open market will decide everything. If one ISP provider is throttling you, another one's not throttling with you, you're going to go with the one that's not throttling you. But the problem in the United States is most of us don't have a choice. I don't have a choice in internet provider. I could go get AT&T and get, up to 12 megabyte DSL, or Verizon, get up to 12 megabyte DSL. That's my max speed. Right now I get 60. So all Charter would have to do is throttle me a little bit, down to 30, down to 20 at times, and that's still faster than the fastest DSL connection, and I have no other alternative for high speed. And then unfortunately, that's the way the rest of the country works. And honestly, that's the greater issue here than net neutrality is obviously that there's already monopolies. The only reason net neutrality even matters, we wouldn't need net neutrality if we didn't have monopolies on our internet in the first place. But we do. And I know you might look at that map again. Let me bring up the map. You might look at this map and think, oh, we really don't have monopolies. I mean, look at all these different places here. Look at, you got Comcast and Cablevision. Sorry, excuse me. Mid-Continent, Time Warner, Verizon, Frontier, AT&T. Look at all of these different internet providers that are all over our country. But what you'll notice is they own entire states. So many of our people do not have an option for internet, for high-speed internet. I'm talking high speed. I'm not talking about any internet connection, period. We can all get, multiple options for internet, period. But this is the real issue. The issue isn't net neutrality. The issue is this. And personally, I'm going to be contacting my current congressman, and if they don't agree with my stance, I will see who's up for election next and contact their side of things. And I'm actually wondering, beyond net neutrality, are they willing to try to put into legislation or at least propose laws that can break up this monopoly, that can prevent Time Warner Cable, who has a deal with my local government to not allow any new cable lines to be laid, so no other cable company can come in. The only kind of people that can come in are fiber, because it's a different kind of cable and they don't own a contract for that. I'm really, really hoping that something can be done about this. If something can be done about this map, this map you're seeing, then net neutrality won't matter as much. Because the more competition there is, the less and less likely service providers are going to do anything with net neutrality not being around. Because the more restrictions and the more things they do is going to cause consumers to go with other products that aren't doing it. But again, because this exists, this is why net neutrality matters. That's really all I have to say on that. I know the comment section is going nuts right now, But this is a big deal. I mean, we can't ignore that this is a big deal. So you guys, let me know what you're thinking up in that live chat. Let me know. I'm going to set this video to go live after because this is a very important thing. You guys let me know down in the comments once this video is live. I really want to know what you guys think about all of this. Do you think I'm an idiot even that I explained things correctly? I hope I did. Why net neutrality matters. What happens now that it's gone. I tried to use what I view is a reputable website for this to provide this additional information on potential lawsuits and the FTC stepping in, and that net neutrality could come back if it gets too bad, but then it's obviously going to depend on the government and what they want to do. And obviously, can we trust the government to always do the right thing? I mean, they did the right thing once with net neutrality. Does it mean they'll do the right thing again if it gets bad? But the fact that it has to get bad for the government to step in, Again, I always say when ISPs tell you that it doesn't matter if net neutrality exists or not, because they're going to follow the regulations that were set by it anyways, but yet all of them are fighting for it to go away. That's really all you need to know about what ISPs plan to do with net neutrality gone. Anyways, folks, I'm Nathaniel Dance from Nintendo Prime. I hope you like this stream or this video if you're watching it after the fact. I greatly appreciate all of your guys' support. You can still go to that same net neutrality website if you would like. I don't know how much it's going to help at this point, but you should seriously get in contact with your local congressman. Let them know how much this still matters to you, because there are still things that can be done about this during the next election cycle and after the fact, and let them know that they need to still pay close attention to these ISPs. Make sure the FTC does their job. And prevents, and even, as I said, try to fight against the monopolies that are out there. Let's break up the monopolies and bring in healthy competition, and that will make net neutrality fix itself. Just my opinions, of course. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and you know what? I'm going to catch you guys in the next one. Peace out. Oh, I should mention before I go that if you would like to support us for as little as $1 a month, head to patreon.com/Nintendo Prime. You guys don't have to, but I would greatly appreciate your support. Peace.